Welcome to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, where we break down a 12-team fantasy football league, Dynasty style, every single week. Tom and Sam here with you this week to break down Week 6 of the fantasy football season. Sammy, we're not with Cody today, so how are you feeling?
I know. It's been kind of weird, man. Like, I feel like we're riding the bicycle rather than the tricycle today. It's a lot more efficient.
We actually already botched the first run of this, and I initially made the joke that Cody was a square wheel. I don't have any other jokes. So moving on from that, I want to do a quick rundown of the agenda for this week. We're going to go through the quick rundown of each matchup of Week 6, highlight a couple key players. Not going to be the whole show by any means. Hopefully we can get straight to our segment for this week, which last week we did a redraft, and I don't think we've actually even published that yet, but we did a redraft of the 2019 rookies, and we were surprised by the results, actually a lot of surprise players. And then this week we're going to do a reevaluation of the midway mark power rankings, followed by our thoughts on what each team in the power rankings should do moving forward for this season. Then we're going to give you guys a league discussion topic, take a couple minutes talking about what we think ourselves, and then we're going to turn it to you guys, and we're going to ask you to talk about it on either Sleeper or Facebook. And hopefully we can come to a consensus and maybe implement either, if it's a rule change, we can implement it over the off season. And that, I think, would be a good way to start talking about it now while we're ahead. And then we're going to wrap up the show for you guys. But before then, normally we would go into our trivia show. This week, we don't have Cody, the trivia master, so we're going to start off with talking about what our Week 6 fantasy football headlines are, and so for that, I'm going to turn to Sam to give, what's your Week 6 headline?
Honestly, it's got to be the Chiefs. I mean, they've been a little bit disappointing the last 3 weeks. You got to kind of think that the league has figured them out a little bit.
Yep. Running back situation down. Tyreek Hill back. He's up. Sammy Watkins is injured. Mahomes is limping around, not looking as good, and so... do you believe that there's a reason that they could rebound, or is it just going to be this bad?
Yeah, I think they'll rebound a little bit. I mean, we'll have to see like really how much they rebound. It'll be somewhere between the expectations preseason and now, I would say.
Yes, and it is funny because a lot of people's discussion topics were, will Patrick Mahomes regress? And will the Chiefs regress? And if they do, what does that look like? And I think a lot of people's answers to that was, well, he's going to regress, but he's still going to have a top 3 season regardless. Well, now it's like, well, 3 games in a row of not that. I mean, I don't know. I wish we had the stat on it. It'd be interesting to see what level fantasy quarterback he is in the last 3 weeks, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredibly average. As reference, every one of the last 3 weeks, he's finished between 20 and 21 points. So how about that for consistent? Just not the kind of consistent you're really looking for. I mean, still the number 4 quarterback on the year. He's been fine. I think he'll end as a top 5. Who knows if he'll be 1 or not? There's too much variance involved with that. He's still my Dynasty QB1 for sure. So he'll be fine long term, but it's not clear-cut number 1 overall for this year.
Yes, and I think it's just interesting to see. Whenever you talk ad nauseum about a fantasy topic over the offseason, it's interesting to actually see that come to fruition and see what actually happens. And it's been 3 games, but I don't think he's going to do better than last year already. I can say that.
No, I agree with you completely. I think he'll be probably slightly below last year.
Right, which is still very worth owning on any fantasy format. So even DFS, he's still very, very valuable, and especially Dynasty. This week, I wanted to talk about, for my fantasy football headline, the officiating. And I'm obviously very biased because me, Sam, and a couple of other league mates, Cody and Jake O'Brien, watched the game together, along with my father and Sam's new wife, Alyssa Betland. And at the end of the game, the lines were a little screwed over. I'm sure you've heard of it. The two hands to the face called on Trey Flowers. The funny thing is he is now a 5th-year veteran, and in his entire career he has never been called for that penalty. So what's more likely, the refs suck, well, which we know now in post site, or that Trey Flowers is known for hands to the face, which he's not. And so my thought moving forward on this is that I believe that there should be implemented a Sky Ref, which would have access to digital things that refs on the field don't, which basically it's just means of looking at camera angles. And I think that you could have all 6 possible camera angles, or they might even have more, all synced in time at once, and that SkyRef could be phoned in by the refs on the field instantaneously and say, look back at this. We think there's a holding on the play. Just give us what you think. It doesn't even have to be like a formal review in the way that they do for challenges. So, Sam, I don't know. Do you think that's a good idea, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear at this point they have to do something, right? It's either that or allowing challenges and more penalties than just pass interference. But you can't just give away games, which is essentially what they did. I mean, obviously, no one can quantify exactly what would have happened if those weren't called, but I would put the over-under at about 10 points. And in a literally 1-point game, 10 points makes all the world of difference. They would have been much, much different if the refs were just even.
Yeah, and that's where, again, I think that there has to be some sort of improvement, and I think that luckily that this event last night, where there were 4 or 5 clearly wrong penalties, I think that it being on national television, we've got people like Barry Sanders, Jack Del Rio, players in the NFL chiming in on it. I think that actually is enough that something is going to happen in the offseason for sure, and maybe even sooner. So I'm encouraged. Of course, it's going to take the effing Lions to change another rule, but but anyway, the Lions are 2-1 now, and I'm sadder than I was before the game.
Tough one.
So let's move on to talking about a quick Week 6 rundown. This week, matchup of the week. Before the season, if I would have seen that it was me and Mike Reed, I would have said, "Oh, it's us." But my team is now 1-5 post fact, and so I think I'm going to determine that there weren't really that many good matchups this week.
No, I mean, I think match of the week, you got to go Barber and O'Brien. I mean, both probable playoff teams, and that's really the only playoff matchup that I can see out there, or a probable playoff matchup I can see out there.
And I absolutely agree. And in that case, O'Brien scored 184.6 points. Eric Barber scored 125.9 points. He lost by a whopping amount of points there. And really, I think looking through kind of what happened in the matchup here, it's a bunch of close to being zeros on Barber's end. We have Manuel Sanders with 1 reception.
0 yards.
0 yards. Literally just got a PPR.
Yep.
Tyler Boyd, which we've been pretty high on Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, he's been great.
He's been great this week, kind of a dud. And then you've got his tight end situation, which admittedly is not his normal situation. But I believe that's Charles Clay. 2 receptions, 8 yards. And then Marvin Jones, he was not targeted in the way that Kenny Golladay was. And so anyway, you look at that, to me, that's kind of just the story, right? I mean, when you have that many duds in a week, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real bummer. I think his team, I think we've all kind of agreed he's probably slightly outperformed what he should be doing just based on the Patriots' insane start to the season, and especially their defense's insane start to the season. That's to say, I don't think he'll average 126 points the rest of the season like he did here, but he'll probably get somewhere towards that 150 or so, be a middle-of-the-way team. With his hot start, he could probably still be a playoff team, but really, really tough week for him.
Yeah, I mean, are you encouraged by two positives here? I think are DJ Moore and Sony Michel. Between those two, are you encouraged by any of them? What they did?
DJ Moore, yes, quite a bit. I've liked him a lot coming into the year. I mean, I believe he was the number 1 receiver drafted in the 2018 draft. He's been good. I think Carolina, like, the quarterback situation is not as good, even though Allen's been pretty decent. But yeah, either way, I think he'll be great. Be a wide receiver 2 probably going forward. Sony Michel, I don't know. He's actually kind of a sell high for me right now. He had 22 carries for 86 yards. Decent yards per carry. That's not too bad. 3 targets, 2 receptions. So you look at the usage. That's really not that bad. But you look at his games, and this is his highest snap percentage, and that's at 50%. And it seemed like even less if you watch the game. I mean, they're playing 5 running backs, and he's not getting any of the goal line carries. I think if you look at just the stats, it looks like he had a good game, but I'm actually pretty worried about him.
Yeah, you want to see the volume, and I'm really happy to see that. But to your point, they're giving Brandon Bolden enough looks to steal away from Sony Michel, and so I 100% agree with you. This is an awesome sell high opportunity. Yeah. I don't know whether Barber will or not, but maybe we'll talk about that later on in the power rankings. On the other side of the matchup, Jake O'Brien, he's really starting to look like the team that we thought he would be. Scored 185 points this week. highest score of the week. If I'm thinking that
You are
correctly.
correct.
Okay. Yep. And so I guess straight away looking at it, the player that jumps away right away is James Conner.
Yeah, it's a big week.
Big week. It looks like with their third string quarterback there in Pittsburgh that they're really committed to the run game. And I think the funny thing is it seems like James Conner's skill has gone down maybe, or something has changed in his running ability, but his volume, if this keeps up, I mean, which I think it reasonably could, I think that's a great sign for James Conner.
Yeah. I think it's a great sign too. As long as they're, it's not Rudolph anymore, is it?
No,
So
it's Hodges. Devin Hodges.
I mean, he just had to dump off the ball the whole game. I mean, you can see most of what James Conner did here is receiving 7 targets, 7 receptions, 78 yards. I mean, you look at that, and plus the touchdown, it's 2/3 of his points based on receiving right there. On the field 50% of the time. 16 touches definitely isn't bad, but 2.6 yards per carry. If he can get 7 targets a game, he'll be a running back one for sure. So you just got to hope that I'm blanking on the backup's name that was out. Jalen Samuels.
Right.
If Jalen Samuels stays out, I like James Conner a lot. But if Jalen Samuels is in, he's going to leech some carries. Might not be as good, but either way, great week for him.
A quick takeaway from me, in addition to, we're talking about the running back situation in Pittsburgh, was that I don't think Benny Snell is a good running back. He actually reminds me a lot of Jordan Howard, who I have a sweet spot in my heart for, but they're very similar running backs where they'll take what you give them. And so, I don't remember his exact fantasy total this week, but it was actually fairly high. But I don't think he's someone, like, speaking of sell high, if he has another good game, I would want to sell him personally.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think he's necessarily the most talented running back, but I do think he has value right now, just because, like I said, Jalen Samuels is out. James Conner got dinged up in this game, so if he is the starting running back, that's just automatic value.
Yeah, another player for Jake O'Brien, Terry McLaurin, 28 points this week. I was personally very interested to see how he would do coming back from injury, missing last week, and boy, he only had 4 receptions, but you kind of got to think that and even against Miami, kind of surprising, but it doesn't matter. I mean, seeing any sign of life for a rookie after getting injured is very encouraging.
Yeah, man, he's insane. I loved the stat that they put up during or after that game. So through the first 5 games of their career, guess who has more receiving yards than Terry McLaurin?
Randy Moss,
good call.
Oh, damn.
and Chris Carter.
Chris Carter, wow.
You're in
2 Vikings.
Exceptional territory if those are the 2 you're talking about in contention with. I mean, yeah, he's been elite, at least 7 targets every game. I don't expect him to slow down. I don't think he's matchup dependent at this point. I think he's a plug and play in pretty much anyone's lineup.
And it's not like we haven't seen this before where the late round draft picks do all of a sudden just have value.
Well, I mean, he's a 3rd, so he's not even like he's that late. And He was just a great athlete coming out of college. So he's clearly refined it a little bit, and they like him a lot. So, I mean, going forward, do you think that it changes when they get Dwayne Haskins in? Because obviously he's the future of the franchise. Does that help or hurt McLaurin?
I would think it helps, right? I mean, we've seen this before where the situation, the status quo that is clearly not the future, establishes a receiver, and then the offense going into the offseason now says, okay, clearly this guy is an established receiver. Now that we're bringing in our new guy that we really truly actually believe in, we want to focus the offense around this new receiver and this quarterback combination. I can't think of any offhand, but I feel like that's a recurring theme in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I can't think of any right now either, but I do think once Dwayne Haskins actually does start, he's going to kind of lean on Terry McLaurin, knowing they don't really have many other good options.
Right. I guess if I would think about it as I imagine that if OBJ were still in New York, that Daniel Jones would be told to throw to him quite often, right?
Yeah.
That's an example of, I guess, what I'm thinking, and I don't think Dwayne Haskins is a bad quarterback, and so that can only help his value too.
Yep. I agree. They could be a very good combo going forward for a while.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess in summary, O'Brien looking like the team we thought he was going to be. Barber slowing down a little bit, which again isn't too surprising based off of our preseason expectations. But Jake O'Brien taking away the win, moving to 5-1, and Eric Barber moving to 4-2. And so that I want to move on to talking about your matchup. You played Megs this week. It was a very close matchup.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, tough matchup for you in the sense that you're a new look team, and so is Matt, but your new look's in the complete opposite of the spectrum.
I mean, I think Matt outwitted me on this one. I played half of his old team against him, and they all sucked. So he sold me all the players he knew was going to be bad. I mean, you look at got Derrick Henry 4 points, Keenan Allen 6 points. At least Michael Thomas had 17, so that's a little bit below average, but still fine. Either way, pretty tough week for me, I would say, and very, very good week for him based on, I would say, pretty much 1 to 2 specific players.
Well, yeah, his name rhymes with figs. Yeah. Merry Digsmas, we say to Matt Magnuson, because holy crap, he had 50.5 points. Big play bonuses, I think, came into play for our league specifically to add up, because I believe in standard or in typical PPR leagues, I think he got like 44 or something. So, yeah, big week from Diggs, which is the reason it was as close as it was. Funny that he wasn't able to pull it out, but I'm sure he's happy with that in his current rebuilding efforts.
Oh yeah, I mean it builds Diggs stock for sure. I mean we were just talking about it last week that we were wondering if he could even get a 2020 first for Diggs, and this obviously brings him back up. Sorry, at least close to what he was before, even just with 1 week showing that Kirk will throw to him. And I mean, as long as things keep going the way they are, he'll stay on the Vikings, which is obviously good.
So to represent kind of the pulse of the 4 different sources that I like listen to for my fantasy things, I try to listen to a bunch of different content. You know, QB List, I read their articles, I listen to Football Guys, I listen to Fantasy Footballers, and then I read the Fantasy Pros articles. And basically all of them think this is an awesome time to sell high on Diggs. In redraft. But I guess in redraft for a 25-year-old, that actually is pretty similar value for Dynasty. Do you agree that it's a time to sell high?
I guess in this specific scenario of our league specifically, I don't know what he could get that to be worth it. I mean, I think most people look into this and look at it and say he had 1 good week out of, 5 now? So maybe they're still not believing, maybe they are. I mean, if you can get 2 firsts for Diggs, I'd say it's probably fine value if you're in the full rebuild like he is. But also, if you want to hold, play into him, build around him, I think that's fine too. I mean, what do you think?
I probably have to think about it more, but my gut instinct does tend to buy into the fact that he is like a reasonable sell, especially because he's not looking to compete this year. Now, I mean, I guess, but to now that I'm fighting against me, Adam Thielen is aging, and he's 4 years older than Diggs. And so Diggs is probably the clear wide receiver 1 in 3 years, once Thielen is maybe not as athletic as he once was, and Diggs is in his prime at 28. So I guess I'm talking myself into saying that he actually probably is a hold, especially because the quarterback situation is going to change as well. I'm pretty certain they're not going to keep Cousins after next year.
Depends on how his next 2 years go. But he'll probably be too expensive if he plays well.
I would imagine.
So, yeah, honestly, I'd say he could go either way. Obviously, after a big week, if people buy into that big week, then sell. But looking at the Vikings and being a Vikings fan, which way is the ball going to go every week? It went Thielen big a couple weeks, and he even had a touchdown last week. So I think he's clearly the receiver on this team right now. But Diggs had a big week. Cooks had a few big weeks. I think we're still a run-first offense, despite the 4 throwing or passing touchdowns. I think that's just Philadelphia being a terrible secondary and a great run defense. So, I don't know. I'd say if you could get good, decent value, sell. But he's also 25. I think he's still a wide receiver 2 going forward. So he's a fine hold too. So
this would be the perfect example, now that I'm thinking about it more while you were talking, of if you're a competing team or a team on the fringe of competing, or I guess you think you're going to make the playoffs. This being, to me, an awesome opportunity to try to flip Diggs for this year value.
I completely agree. I mean, it doesn't really make sense for this league because Trujillo's competing. But if you could go Diggs and a second for Julio Jones, if you're trying to compete, Julio Jones is going to crush Diggs the rest of the year. So that'd be great value, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Deshaun Watson, 29 points. He's a beast.
2 rushing touchdowns.
2 rushing touchdowns is the main part of his value there. Great to see him really performing. I think, I don't know, I personally wanted to see him finish about where people thought before he was going to finish. And it looks like he is going to finish like that exact top 3. Everyone thought he was going to finish. And so, I don't know. I'm a big fan of Deshaun Watson. I think his injury from his rookie season is clearly behind him.
Yep.
And other than that, those are the 2 big scores for Magnuson there that got him as close as he was.
Yeah, rest of the team's a little lackluster. Third highest scorer was his linebacker.
Yep, that's never something you want to see.
He's rebuilding, so
He is rebuilding.
that happens.
And
You don't want to win necessarily. So
right, I think he's actually happy that it was a loss there.
yep.
So yes, stock up from his perspective for his team. Able to lose while still getting positives from his 2 rebuilding pieces.
Yeah, from the 2 pieces he'll be starting 2 years from now.
Correct.
Yep.
And then on your side of the coin here with 160 points, definitely disappointing. You already kind of alluded to it. And we already talked about Mahomes. Nothing to worry about with Cook. But the player I want to bring up, and I'm not, and again, with Henry, he gets enough volume where I'm not really too concerned about him either. But we did talk about this yesterday and before the show even a little bit. But Keenan Allen, boy, the Chargers offense does not look good. Hunter Henry looked very good. It was kind of the Hunter Henry show. And Gordon and Eckler didn't do too much, but they're definitely splitting. And so I don't know what to think about this Chargers offense at all, period.
Yeah, I'm kind of questionable too. I think Keenan Allen has the track record. He'll be fine. I think a couple of these defenses are just dialing in. Pretty unfortunate it's Miami and Pitt is 2 of them. Denver makes more sense. But I mean, I was reading the sleeper analysis of it, and they said, I don't know if we should start to consider Keenan Allen whether he should be a start every week or not. And that seems a bit far the other way. Maybe he won't be a wide receiver 1 at year end, but do you think he ends less than wide receiver 24? Because I think there's almost 0 chance.
No, you're starting him every week on your team,
Yeah.
I think. The only situation you wouldn't is if, I guess I'm offhand, your wide receivers, like if Jeffrey suddenly becomes some monster or Corey Davis gets reignited somehow. But I don't see either of those happening.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey's been great. Kirk's been okay. But with Allen's history, I'm going to give him another 3 or 4 weeks at least. And if he still gets 5, then yeah, I'll think about it.
Yeah. So in other words, no concern. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great for sure. Stock down by a lot. But
Yeah.
I'm still starting him for sure.
Yes, right. David Johnson went off, which you're happy with, but Travis Kelce, I think, has actually had 2 weeks in a row of pretty mediocre play, right? 12-9, which is not what you bought him for.
No.
And he's actually someone we didn't really talk about when we were talking about the Chiefs, surprisingly. We talked about the running back, wide receiver, and quarterback situation, but I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it all kind of goes hand in hand. Since those are all kind of down, it looks like Kelce is too.
I actually don't think as much. I think probably a little bit, but we all agree what's the most variable part of fantasy football?
The game itself.
I meant touchdowns.
Oh,
Yeah, either way, he has 1 touchdown of the season. This was his lowest yards in a week, and he went 4 receptions for 58 yards. Every other week he's had over 70, which it's like you're getting a tight end with 7 receptions, 70 yards. It's not that bad. It's not what you expect from Kelce. He's still the tight end 3 on the year. I mean, sure, it might not be what I bought him for, but it's not that bad. I'm confident he'll pick it back up.
Okay. Yeah. And with that, you won again. You won by 2.72 points. 2 teams that look completely different than they did to start the year, and you're looking like the one that's going for win now, and so you pull out the win. You move to 4-2. Matt goes to 1-5. So let's talk about my matchup now again to get it out of the way. Boy, what a roller coaster that was. I'm worst manager again.
Yeah, I saw that.
Highlight of the week is that Marquise Brown got 0 points, and I don't even know why, to be honest. I mean, I heard, at noon they said he was gonna play. I thought didn't get any targets. I don't know what's up with that, but
Yeah, I'd probably drop him, honestly.
I might drop him. And other news for my team, we'll get into this more later, but I actually do think my team is fine. Juju Smith-Schuster, 1 reception. Boy.
Yeah, that's a brutal one.
This is very clear. I mean, a lot of Juju's value with Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown was they stretch out the field, and either one of those guys could do any part of the game. They both do the slants well, they both do the deep routes well, and they're both fairly sizable receivers. And now he's the only one that can do that without Roethlisberger, with their third stringer, Devin Hodges, who looks like he was afraid to throw the ball farther than 10 yards.
He had James Conner a lot, probably behind the line.
You're not wrong. And so there is very legitimate reason to be concerned with Juju Smith-Schuster. 4 weeks ago, we were like, yeah, maybe a little bit, but very clearly reason to be concerned about him. And I'm actually this feels so strange to say, but I'm looking forward to when Mason Rudolph comes back.
Yeah, man, it's brutal. It's honestly to the point, and given this is a testament to your team and how deep it is. But if everyone's healthy, I don't think you start Juju. For sure not while Mason Rudolph's gone. Maybe when he comes back. But it's just, I mean, you can't have, with your receivers, like, I doubt, who else do you got here?
I guess to answer your question,
who's the Chicago guy?
I'm starting Allen Robinson over him.
That's what I mean. Like, Allen Robinson will have a much higher floor than Juju will. And it's just...
And Marquise Brown. Honestly.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, at least for sure a higher ceiling for him.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's in for a rough stretch here for a bit, but long term, I think he's fine.
Yes, and I agree. I mean, he's 22 years old. And so, again, it's the same thing we're talking about with Terry McLaurin. He's actually the same age as Terry McLaurin as a third-year vet. And so, third year, is that right? Is he? Oh, yeah, because he started at 20 years old.
Yeah, he was the youngest player in the NFL for a bit.
Unreal. Yep. So anyway, whoever their new quarterback is, he's an established receiver. So same as the McLaurin effect, basically. Again, yeah, dynasty-wise, completely fine. Other than that, I guess the highlights are Tyreek's back.
Yeah, that was clearly he is back.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't look injured at all.
Did you see his catch?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That was beautiful.
That was unbelievable.
And
it wasn't even just like a running straight. He made a great catch.
It was a great catch, and that's where it's encouraging because the story about him last year before the season started was, okay, he's really fast. We're going to look at, this is before Mahomes broke out. It was kind of like, all right, Mahomes has a big arm. He's going to be thrown to Tyreek deep a lot. And everyone kind of thought, and he's even come out and said that he doesn't want to be this, but everyone does think he's just a fast receiver, like the fastest guy in the league that has good route running. Mm-hmm. I mean, if he can improve his ball skills, then as a 25-year-old, which we're talking about is the same category as Diggs, I'm very encouraged and I want to hold him very hard.
Yeah, no, he's great and tied to a great offense, and he's the best weapon on that offense. So, yep, he's solid.
Yeah, and then we already alluded to it before, but the last note to make about my team is Hunter Henry was on my bench, and he scored 32 points, and not just 32 points from a couple plays. I mean, he had 9 targets, and he caught 8 of them. So you can't be any more encouraged about a guy that was very hyped in the season, but was just injured. So
that's what you've been hoping for Hunter Henry for 2 years now with all those injuries. But, one other point I'd like to bring up is that Lamar Jackson was actually the first player to get nominated for Rusher of the Week for a quarterback.
Really?
Ever, yeah. With 150 yards rushing and 1 touchdown. So, I mean, that's kind of what we've talked about before with Lamar is that, I mean, given that's not his floor, because you can't expect someone to get 150 yards rushing, but the fact that he can rush, that raises his floor so much.
He's actually more than likely to finish at least an RB2. Like if you strip away his passing, any passing yards, any passing stats, he actually could finish as an RB2.
Yeah, and then you add in an average passer in the league, and then he's just a great quarterback. So yep.
Yeah, so super happy that especially with how bad Jared Goffel has been, I'm really happy with Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
And then we have the other side of the spectrum here. My opponent, Mike Reed, had a good week, honestly, and was able to beat me.
Pretty par for the course for him now.
Pretty par for the course. 175 points. Russell Wilson's on fire.
Yep.
We love him. Chubb, any concerns with Kareem Hunt coming back soon?
Not really. I mean, I think he'll take a little bit of a hit, but I start him every week, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Godwin again, even though Jameis Winston tries to be the worst quarterback ever to throw 400 yards consistently, Godwin he looks more and more legit every week.
Number 1 wide receiver in the game through 6.
Yeah,
it's pretty dang impressive.
Half of a typical fantasy, or I guess depending on either half or close to half of a typical fantasy season.
At least a third. So
yes,
yeah, he's looking good.
Yeah, unreal. Cooper Kupp down game, but again, Jared Goff and a very legitimate San Francisco defense. And the reality is, looking at Mike's team, there isn't much. Well, actually, there is. I'm looking at it again. Will Dissly, more than likely out for the season, torn Achilles.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess that prompts us to look at his tight end situation.
He is the guy from San Francisco that Adam traded him.
That's right. Or from Pittsburgh?
Vance McDonald. Pittsburgh,
McDonald,
sorry.
right.
McDonald, who looked terrible.
Yeah, and so, which is funny because his nickname for him on his team is Buyer's Remorse.
Yeah.
Kind of looking like it. So now he's, as a competing team, he's legitimately looking for a tight end he might be trading. I'm guessing, I wouldn't be too surprised if I get a notification that he traded for a tight end.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, who's even on the market right now? Do you know of anyone? I mean, it's a bummer because you would have been the team to go to before, but I mean, obviously Njoku and Howard are so low, and you want to start Hunter Henry, assuming you're trying to go for the playoffs. So it's
Right.
yeah. I mean, hopefully you can find someone. Obviously, I sold Hooper recently. He would have been kind of the one to go for, I think, if you wanted a tight end to compete, but just really unlucky timing.
I think it's a good time to try to go for Waller and Andrews before they are for sure options, even though Andrews has been down lately. I think actually for sure Waller would be a good guy to try to go for, assuming the owner of him isn't too gaga over him.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. So yeah, I'm sure he'll have to find someone.
Yeah. And in that case, yeah, I guess looking at the rest of his team, there isn't really too much. We already touched on how Kupp was down again, but yeah.
I guess one quick point. I saw a Reddit thread today, and I just think it's interesting because it's 3 wide receivers and a pick, and you have to rank them, and all 3 receivers are on his team. So rank them, Tom. Not to spring this on you, but Godwin, Kupp, Galladay in 2020 101.
Oh, interesting.
So rank those.
Oh boy. So right off the bat, you have to assume that 2020 101 is either Jonathan Taylor or Jerry Jeudy.
Or DeAndre Swift. He's also also in that boat.
I'm more likely to think Jeudy and Taylor, I guess, and you've looked into this way more than me.
Those 2 are probably the front runners, yeah.
Right. And there is volatility because Jeudy could go to a bad team or he could go to an excellent team.
Yep.
So somewhere in the middle, right? I guess my inclination here is Godwin, even though I hate admitting that because I know you were harping about him all off season. Godwin, 2021, Kupp, Galladay.
Yep. I think that's about what I'd put it at. I think Kupp and 2020 101 are about a push.
Yeah.
So I could really go either way on that, but I think Godwin's relatively clearly the number 1, and Galladay is pretty clearly the number 4. So, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thread.
It is.
Showing the difference in value based on all those players.
It is.
From what we originally expected.
And the fact that that's a tough question is what makes Mike's team good right now.
Yes. Yep. All for sure. At least Kupp and Godwin are 2 of the biggest raisers of the year. So.
Yeah, and it seems like we talk about it every week, which must mean that it's a real thing for his team. So sweet for Mike. He moves on to 5-1 on the year. I move down to 1-5. But if you're listening right now, listeners, I have not given up yet. I'm still going for points to try to make the playoffs. One of the crucial changes we really did make this year was that points inevitability, if you want to call it that you can make it just on points. And I'm thinking I probably have to make it to somewhere around 4th or 5th, potential. Like best case scenario, I get 6 points overall and I make the playoffs. But I'm still going for it, everyone. So don't try to take my players away from me. We'll see how I feel in a couple weeks. All right, let's talk about Marcus and Fowler. I guess not a bad time to do that.
Yeah.
2 middle-of-the-road record-wise teams. Fowler pulls this one out 117-107. And are there any players standing out too from Fowler's team specifically?
I mean, not based on the stats, but based on the game, is Aaron Jones to me and his counterpart.
Jamal
Williams looked great, and given Aaron Jones to look talented, huge drop pass in the end zone and a huge fumble. They basically pulled him for Jamal Williams.
They did.
That's pretty worrying, honestly, for his stock going forward.
It is, because now we return to a storyline that we talked about 3 weeks ago, which was I brought up, and I think you guys agreed, maybe not to the degree that I did, but I brought up how Jamal Williams could be really sharking Aaron Jones' value. Well, then Jamal Williams got freaking raffle stomped, and it was Aaron Jones only, and then he looked really good. Now Jamal Williams is back. Aaron Jones looked really bad. They literally pulled him. Aaron Rodgers gave him the most disgraced look I've ever seen Aaron Rodgers give, arguably. And sure, the Packers ended up winning that game, but it wasn't much help to Jones. And so you got to wonder, is it time to worry about Jones again?
Yeah, I don't know. Surely doesn't help, but I mean, I know I had Chris Carson earlier this year when he was fumbling all the time. And if a player can't hold on to the ball, they're not going to get playing time. I mean, it's just like that. So we'll have to see we'll have to look at that going forward.
Yeah, I can't hold on whether it's thrown to him or handed to him, it turns out. So Dak had another reasonable game, 18 points. They lost to the Jets, though.
They sure did.
On getting away from fantasy and talking about reality, the Cowboys are stock way down.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know. This is putting you on the spot. Do you know why?
Mari didn't play
That's big.
like the entire game, basically. He might have had a couple of snaps, but it was the majority of the game, so that's pretty brutal. Robbie Anderson had a 95-yard touchdown pass. That one also hurts. And I mean, in my opinion, the big thing is Sam Darnold's back. I think the Jets aren't that bad of a team when Sam Darnold's playing. I mean, I think he's probably a top half quarterback. Lev Bell's great. Their receivers aren't that bad, and their defense isn't that bad. I mean, I'm not saying if Darnold was healthy the whole year, they're probably not a 10-win team, but maybe 6, maybe 7. You know what I mean? They're not what they were before.
Right. So basically what you're saying is we have a 2-point game that comes out of the fact that one team is doing better than what people think they should be, and one team is doing worse than what they think they should be. And so you kind of get that result. So really not too surprising, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Dallas is still probably a better team, but it's football. Any game can go either way. So it's close enough that it's not insane to me.
So, in the words of Eminem, let's snap back to reality and talk about, or dang it, that actually doesn't work. We got to snap back to fantasy.
Yeah,
Crap.
quite the opposite.
Crap. I thought that was going to work really smoothly. Thielen, in the wake of Diggs also having a big game, still had a reasonable game and 17 points. So that's good. But DJ Chark, 8 points.
Well, yeah, I'd like to bring your attention to the other side of this matchup is DeMarcus. You scroll to the very top, and Gardner Minshew with 4 points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans is phenomenal. Like, I actually think 8 points against New Orleans is not good, but I mean, DJ Chark is not a top tier player by no one's standards, so 8 points isn't that bad against them, I don't think. Still 7 targets, too, so.
Right. Unless there's are any other players for Fowler that look noteworthy?
Honestly, if we're looking for a trade target, I haven't done enough research to know why he's playing well, but Ricky Seals-Jones has been decent. So,
I don't know why, but Njoku being out, yeah.
how long is he out for? I'm not aware of that.
It could be anywhere from a couple more weeks to 6 weeks from what I've seen.
Okay, so I mean, potential low value trade target for Mike then, because I mean, I would assume you wouldn't have to pay much for him. I literally dropped him before the season, so
Right. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Yeah.
and he doesn't have any long term value, but
Yeah. So let's see if there's any feelers for that potentially. He might already be trying to do that. Who knows? Because I know he has been active because he made a trade with you. And now Marcus' side of the field, I mean, I think he was someone that going into this week was kind of hoping to be a contender. And I can't imagine that him seeing 107 points makes him happy whatsoever. We talked about how, I don't remember which matchup it was, but I actually think when we were talking about Matt's team, how it was just a bunch of zeros, except for a couple big players. Here's the exact opposite. You look at his team, and it's just all 5 to like 15 point weeks from every single one of his players.
yeah, his highest score was his kicker.
Yeah.
And then his second highest was his defense, which is not great. I mean, a big bye week this week was Josh Jacobs, so he had to start Alexander Madison. He's a great player, but I mean, he's a backup. So Robert Woods had an off week as well as the rest of the Rams. I still like Sutton, I still like Lockett, and they had okay weeks. But yeah, it's pretty underwhelming for most of the players, especially Kamara.
Yeah, Robert Woods still continuing to look, I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of 7 points is actually way better than what actually happened to Robert Woods this week. He had 2 carries for 16 yards and a touchdown, a rushing touchdown. But in the receiving game, 0 receptions, 4 targets, but I don't know.
That's a really great point.
Yeah, and so I don't know. We talked about this last week too about his team, but there are reasons to be concerned with his team. Definitely, I don't think for dynasty purposes, but for this year purposes, it is looking concerning.
Yeah, and I mean he's in a great division too. He has Cody and Trujillo to deal with. Given Matt's, I mean not a top team anymore, but we did think so originally. But either way, he has 2 of the top 5 teams to deal with probably. So
absolutely. Let's talk about. We got a couple matchups left here. Moving on from that one, we have Fowler moving to 3-3. In the playoff hunt, and Marcus moving down to 2-4, and I think we'll probably be talking about him in the power rankings later at R&R evaluation. A team that is very clearly in the playoff hunt and pretty close to being someone that is a shoe-in for the playoffs is Cody, and he played Adam this week. Actually, arguably, that is probably going to be the most lopsided matchup possible going into this game.
Yep.
5-0 versus 0-5. Clear tank versus former champion, reigning champ, as his team name is called. He scored 173 points, reasonable week. And Adam scored 117 points. If I had to guess, it's actually probably their average points for each week.
Yeah, extremely on point for both of these teams. It's exactly what you expect, and even looking player by player, it's pretty dang close to what you'd expect.
Yeah, and so let's start with Adam, because I think the main player we talk about every week that he actually also started this week for his team is McCall Hardman. Very interesting to see what would happen when Tyreek came back. And clearly he went from being someone that's like, oh, yeah, he's startable, to I don't think in redraft leagues, particularly, McCall Hardman is startable anymore.
Nah, probably not. He had 8.5 points, which is still reasonable. I think once Sammy Watkins comes back, he's for sure not startable. But, I mean, on Adam's team right now is fine to start, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
When you don't have any other options, he can be okay while Watkins is out.
Right. And the other player we talk about every week on Adam's team too is Kyler Murray,
Yep.
who, again, from people I listen to, most people just unanimously agree has been looking better every single week.
Just continues to climb.
Yeah.
He's great.
And it actually is kind of carrying the Cardinals in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's surprising, honestly. I mean, I think everyone thought it was a bold move that Kingsbury can come in, get rid of their, I believe it was 9th or 10th overall pick Rosen from last year, after 1 year as a rookie quarterback. That's unprecedented to draft this quarterback 101. But I mean, it looks like it's working. Like, their defense is terrible, so you got to give them that. But like, their offense has looked at least average, if not better than average. So he's fun to watch, man.
It's very encouraging, and that's a great pick from Adam. We already went, spoiler alert, but we thought that was a great pick revisiting our redraft of the rookies, which we'll post probably at the same time as this episode. But yeah, so those are kind of the two big players for Adam's rebuild pillars in my eyes.
Yep.
And so moving over to the other side, Cody, which since he's not here, I don't even care about talking about him and his team because we know it's already good. But I guess if I had to talk about one thing, I would talk about how OBJ actually had a bounce back game, even in the wake of Mayfield allegedly being on fire and terrible.
Yeah, he did have a fine game. I mean, I don't know if I would go as far as to consider this a bounce back game. I mean, you would hope he averages 20 points, right? So like, obviously this brings him back up to what he should be averaging, but I'm still a little bit worried compared to what he should have been coming into this year based on most people's rankings. So, I mean, will he end top 12? Probably. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's going to be close. Will he end top 5 like everyone expected? I would say almost certainly not. So, interesting to watch him going forward though still, but either way, decent week.
I think it's Baker Mayfield and Freddie Kitchens related, which basically means passing and play calling. Mm-hmm. And so you for dynasty purposes, you just got to hope that gets figured out over the offseason. And so there's no reason to believe that he's trading him, and there's no reason to believe that he's not starting him. It's just an unfortunate loss of value for Coates.
Yep, I agree.
And so Mike Evans, speaking of bounce backs, he had a bounce back, real bounce back, 17 targets, more than Godwin, which is worth noting.
Still got outperformed.
Yeah, still got outperformed point-wise. Yep. And he also, when I was watching the game for a half second, he made a crucial drop that would have been either a touchdown or a lot of yards.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, I don't know. I think even coming into the season, that's a really exciting team to watch, other than their running backs, really, because Arians doesn't care about that. But man, that team with Godwin and Evans is super exciting. I mean, Jameis Winston threw for 400 yards. Awesome. And 5 interceptions.
And at least one fumble. I don't know about if there's a second. Yeah.
It's crazy, but I mean, at least that doesn't necessarily impact Godwin and Evans' fantasy value too much. It just decreases their touchdowns. But yeah, I mean, Evans, I think we've both agreed that he'll be fine going forward. I mean, is he the number one on that team anymore? It's probably 1A, 1B at this point, and whichever way you want to put it is fine. So, yep, I think you think he ends top 10?
Yeah.
I think he does too.
I think so too.
Yep.
And I guess the final person I would be personally interested in talking about is Golden Tate.
Yeah.
Down first week, but most people expected that coming back. The rapport isn't there. The on-field, real live game rapport isn't necessarily there. And if I'm looking at it, I actually do want to look at it real quick. I'm guessing his snap percentage wasn't as high as this week.
67%. So yeah, and it was 98% this week.
Perfect.
Yep, snap percentage was way down, or way up this week, I should say. Yeah, like you said, better rapport. He was also against Minnesota the first week, and given it was against New England this week, so not that much of a difference in defense. I do have to say, I think the one major reason he performed this week is the, I think, 60-something yard touchdown he caught, which is great. I mean, I don't think he'll put up 26 every week, but I think he'll be a great floor with those probably 9 to 12 targets, maybe 6 to 7 receptions and 60 or 70 yards.
Absolutely agree. And I think he's going to start most weeks for Cody in the flex position moving forward. So yeah, and that's just adding more solitude to an already great team. Yep. Cody moves to 6-0, and Adam moves down to 0-6, which Adam is, of course, very happy about because he wants to take the ACT and he wants to have pick 101 moving into next year. So we have our final matchup in our quote-unquote quick rundown, which is
Trujillo and Laramie.
Thank you. Trujillo Laramie. Teams moving into the week was 3-2 versus 1-4, and Trujillo scored 172 points to Laramie's 154. Immediately looking at Laramie's team, you got to think Miles Sanders is someone to point out.
Yeah, I mean, he's a receiver, apparently.
Right.
I mean, he had 3 receptions, 86 yards, and a touchdown. This season, I still don't think he has a ton of value. I think he'll, if you need to start him as a flex, I think that's a fine flex play. It's clear he's going to get work, but he won't get the goal line work, and he won't get a majority of the touches. Going forward, though, I do think he'll be good if they ever switch out of the Jordan Howard role.
Yes. And then the other player to talk about with his team, I literally just had it up. It was a player that did something good.
Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, there we go. Talk about him.
Yeah, like I kind of discussed earlier with the whole Dallas New York Jets game, he had a 92-yard touchdown reception, which is going to carry a 125-yard performance, obviously. Huge boost with Donald coming back. I mean, I had him to start the season, and then we made that trade. I was really into him. I think he's the number one receiver on that team, clearly. He's got Darnold playing with him for a while. Really fast. I mean, he's always going to be a big play threat. So going forward, I'd say probably wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I think he's a definite hold dynasty-wise, and someone that isn't by any means a hold, and he has a very hilarious history in our league, is Adrian Peterson. Scored 17 points off of 23 carries. What is he, 33 now?
Yeah.
And he gets 23 carries
34.
in a game. Yeah. And obviously it was the Miami Dolphins, which to me is, if you couldn't get any value out of this man, even a fourth, like seriously, I think you do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, if a competitive team that really needs to fill a spot, let's say there's an injury, needs to fill a spot for a week or two, yeah, throw him a fourth. And yeah, I don't know, man. How is he continuing to do this at that age?
It's pretty unreal. And I feel like it's going to be forgotten about how good he actually was at such an old age, because everyone's going to remember his first 8 seasons. And
yeah, like, I mean, you're looking at the league competitiveness, and like, I feel like everyone's already writing off Shady McCoy as old. And Adrian Peterson has 4 years on Shady McCoy. Like, that's like 50% more of a career. Yeah. That's crazy, man. He's so good.
It sure is. I mean, honestly, it's funny because his nickname is All Day, but it's looking like it could be switched to All Career.
Yeah.
Like, dude is insane.
Tom Brady of quarterbacks.
Yeah. Or running backs. But yeah, I 100% agree. All right. Now moving over to Trujillo's side, unless you want to talk about someone else on Laramie's team.
No, that's about good.
Okay. Eckler. Austin Eckler. We had reason to believe a couple weeks ago that with Melvin Gordon coming back, that he would still be fine and still be very serviceable for his team. But now, again, we talked about this before. It's the whole Chargers as a whole offense is just super down, and Eckler goes down with that. If it was just a points concern, I think I wouldn't necessarily talk about it. But it's not just points. It's 5 carries and 4 targets. He went from being a 25 target or 25 total carries plus targets player to now this week 9. I think that's something to be concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to a certain extent. I do think it'll average out closer. Obviously, he won't have what he had when Melvin Gordon wasn't here, when he was literally a top 5 running back. But I think he's still a serviceable flex, honestly. Like, I think you could slot him in somewhat similar to like a James White role, maybe slightly worse. he should still get more than 4 targets a game. I would think he ends probably closer to 6 or 7 a game. But yeah, like you mentioned, if the Chargers offense can't really do anything, then he's going to be terrible.
Right, and just looking at this game, he had less target plus carry share than Melvin Gordon, and so there probably is reason. And I think even when Gordon was coming back, we thought there was reason to at least think that it's going to be 55-45 with respect to Gordon Eckler.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Right, and so I don't know. I mean, value way down. I think you gotta hope for the Chargers offense as a whole in this situation.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're an Eckler owner, and in this case a Gordon owner as well, because he's a huge Chargers fan. Other than that, Devontae Freeman, great game. 19 carries, 88 yards, 3 receptions for 30 yards, and 2 TDs. But without the touchdown, still a great game. They were down all game too, so they're not all game, but they lost. So I gotta imagine that's a little encouraging for Freeman.
Yep, still worried about him. Past his prime, and I don't know. He got more touches this game, but I'm still concerned about him, to be honest.
Okay.
So what do you think?
I am too, because every week we seem to talk about Ito Smith, how he looks better. I just don't, going back to real NFL again, I don't know. The Falcons just look terrible. And I think a lot of people think that Dan Quinn will be the next firing in the NFL because he just seems to have lost complete hold on the team.
Well, Trujillo's team better hope not, because on any week to week, he could be starting 4 Atlanta players. He's going to start Julio, he's going to start Hooper, and then he also has Ridley and Freeman.
That's very true.
That's a lot of players on one team.
Yeah, and so you can only hope. Again, it's funny. So basically what we're saying now is his team is all about cheering for the Chargers and cheering for the Falcons.
That's correct. Which kind of leads me to another player I'd like to talk about, is just Austin Hooper. I mean, after that big trade that happened last week, between the 2 players that he received, they scored 55 points or so. I mean, Austin Hooper is the number 1 tight end on the season. He's been elite every single. He's had 1 mediocre week, and other than that, he's been great every week. What do you think? I mean, do you think he continues this going forward?
I think that I'm also sad that he was another player that you identified before the season that you were high on. You weren't the only one, but
wasn't this high on him either.
No, he looks good.
Yeah,
and he's producing fantasy wise. Matt Ryan is not a spring chicken, but he'll be around for a while longer. I believe in Hooper for dynasty purposes, and for Trujillo, it's exactly what he was looking for. In the trade.
He's 24, right? He's still young. He's in his 3rd or 4th year as a tight end, so it's not uncommon that it would take him a few years. But yeah, we'll have to see if he can, by the end of the season, if he can fit himself into the bottom of that top tier of tight ends.
Yes, and already it kind of looks like it. So, yeah, excellent for his team. And it actually was kind of a difference maker that Hooper did as well as he did for him, even though it was against Laramie. He moved to 4-2 after this week, and Laramie moves down to 1-5, which, again, is not – I don't think that's something Laramie is disappointed in, because he's also kind of doing a rebuild here, I think. And so that kind of concludes our matchups. Any overarching thoughts from all those matchups?
Not really. I think a lot kind of happened that we expected to happen, to be honest, this week. So
it's actually very true, except for, well, never mind. I promised I wouldn't get into this.
I think a lot of the people that we expected to win won.
Yes.
Based on previous rankings.
100% agree. And so with that, let's move into our week 6 segment, which was last week we did a rookie ranking. Reevaluating the rookie draft, I guess is a better way of putting it. This week, we want to talk about the power rankings. Sam did diligent work this week. At least 2+ minutes of evaluation of our teams to put a power rankings together.
Might have even been 3.
Oh, shit. That's real dedication. And so with that, I kind of want to turn it to you, Sam. I want you to give us what the power ranking is. Just quick, maybe not even giving notes the first time we run through. Oh, actually, screw it. Let's just do it. Do you want to start from the bottom or start from the top?
Let's start from the bottom. How about that? That's a good idea.
Okay.
Let's start from the bottom. We can do analysis as we go.
Yes. Let's kind of reveal it, so to speak.
Yep.
So you take it away. What's your number 12 team? And let's start talking.
I think number 12 is pretty obvious for the rest of the season. That's Adam Wentz. Pretty, like we've talked about, he has Kyler Murray, and that's about it. I mean, really nothing for running backs. His receivers are maybe the worst in the league, not for dynasty purposes, but for at least this year. I mean, you hope Mike Williams, McCole Hardman turn out going forward. He has plenty of draft picks. But yeah, does he win one game this year?
No, probably not. I mean, he plays me next week. I know that for sure. I think we already talked about this. We had a bet. We said probably one.
I think I put the line at one.
One, so right? Just because of fantasy football variance, which is all comes from touchdowns, basically, like you said earlier. Yeah, and he has the capability. In some weird week where Ito Smith goes completely off, Hardman goes off too, and Kyler Murray goes off. I think that's the winner.
Yeah,
for you.
I completely agree. So I mean, how do you think about him going forward though? Looking at his assets he has. One player we haven't talked about much because he's been injured. He has N'Keal Harry, who's going to be great. Mike Williams could potentially be good, like McCole Hardman, like I've said. And then the draft picks, 5 2020 first-round draft picks. Looking at it right now, I believe that's 4 seconds. I mean, that's tons of assets going into next year. How do you think he fits in a year or two from now?
We've talked about this a lot. And I completely agree with what you've said before, which is he vaults into being a potential, or I won't even say potential. He vaults into being in the conversation for being a top 4 team as soon as next year. And I think one thing that you said before you started talking about his picks was N'Keal Harry. I mean, he is so wickedly talented. I mean, a lot of people thought he could have gone 101. Obviously, Josh Jacobs clearly ruled out that argument. But we're talking about a guy that could just explode coming very soon. He's supposed to be coming back to practice, speaking of N'Keal Harry news. And so he's an instant hold. Someone that we'd be talking about right now, probably, if he was playing, as being someone that could pop off any week and win him a game. So, I mean, that needless to say, if he hits the average hit rate in a first round for normal years, like anywhere from 50 to 60%, in the 2020 draft, I don't know if the hit rate will increase, but based on the depth, it probably will. So you have to assume he's going to probably hit anywhere from 3 to 4 out of his 5 first-round picks.
Well, to me, you can't even just count those. You know what I mean? He has 9 in the first 2 rounds.
Right.
So even if you drop that 25%, you're talking about hitting 4 to 5 players. I mean, that's 2/3 of his team that's going to roll over next year. I mean, that could be potentially great for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, huge optimism, and it is really great that in this year's draft he cemented his QB position.
Yeah,
as well,
for sure.
So he doesn't have to focus this year on doing that, which actually seems like really good, like management. Honestly,
yeah, I agree. Really good to build off of for him.
Yeah, and so that answers your question, I think, pretty well. High optimism for next year already for Adam, even though his team is terrible this year.
Yeah, someone that should definitely do his research before next year's draft.
Yes.
Because that draft will make or break his team for 5 years.
Absolutely. All right. So without further ado, I guess who's your number 11?
Number 11 is another person that should do a little bit of research going into the next couple of years, and that is Matt Magnuson. Obviously was not this low coming into the season, was kind of a middle-of-the-road pack, probably chasing a playoff hunt, but with a really tough start to the season. He sold pretty much every good player he had. Definitely looking to try to rebuild. He traded for plenty of draft picks and kind of left his starting lineup bare.
Yeah, it's calculated, right? This isn't something that's just, I mean, I think it's calculated as of 4 weeks ago. I think he was hoping to compete this year, but he had a very short leash on that. And so once he saw his team no longer competing, he was very quick to fire sale. If not every, I mean, we talked about it. It's funny because we're talking about Adam and him back to back. His 2 pillars, like we talked about earlier, are just Stephon Diggs and Deshaun Watson. And from there, you're hoping from some sort of miracles for the future. You're hoping maybe that Tony Pollard somehow gets some value.
Rashad Penny. Devin Singletary actually should provide plenty of value too.
Very good point. I think Devin Singletary, in the same vein as N'Keal Harry, are going to be very important next year if he wants to compete.
Yeah. And honestly, looking at his draft picks, I think Adam's team could be just instantly going from the worst team to a middle or even, I don't know, 3rd or 4th best team in the league based on next year's draft. I think Matt's team is a little bit more going to be gradual. Maybe it could, because his team is still better than Adam's currently. But next year he has 3 first-rounders compared to Adam's 5, and he doesn't have any second-rounders compared to Adam's 4. But That being said, he does have 4 2021 firsts. So he has 7 first-round picks over the next 2 years. So I think we're looking at more of a 2021-2022 run for Matt.
Yep, you hit the nail on that 100%. And the thing is, that when we look at it, Adam is a bit more inexperienced, and so I'm personally very happy to see that he could vault into next year's conversation because he's very eager to do so. He wants to be a competing team, whereas Mags is very experienced. This isn't his first rodeo in Dynasty, and so he can be more patient. He knows how to manage a team, and I think he will be ready by 2021.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, who's number 10?
All right, number 10, we have Laramie. With his team, I mean, he's got great young running backs. I don't think anyone will debate that. Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Marlon Mack, and I'm blanking on the Bears running back.
Tariq Cohen. Nope.
David Montgomery.
Thank you.
David Opportunity, as the fantasy footballers say. I mean, that's 4 honestly solid running backs that could be starters on his team going forward for the next 5 years. I mean, who knows? Running backs, they always get injured and stuff, but I like them all. I think they're all really high ceilings, so could be great. Wide receivers are a little bit lackluster right now. As we talked about, Robbie Anderson could provide a huge boost to his team if he gets that. Michael Gallup could be good, was really good before he got injured. But other than that, maybe Sterling Shepard, maybe Tyrell Williams. I mean, what do you think about his receivers other than that?
I mean, like you already alluded to, Michael Gallup, I think, had a lot of expectations this year. He's playing against Philly next week, so we'll see if he can take advantage of that. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I think we were hoping for a Geronimo Allison over MVS situation for him, and that has not been the case. I think most people have concluded that it is MVS's world for wide receiver 2. And so Robbie Anderson is his pretty much one pillar receiver there.
Yep.
And then great that he got Mark Andrews at tight end.
Yeah, and honestly, huge props to him because I know we had plenty of trade talks before the season started, and I was going for either Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, and obviously I traded for Travis Kelce, and because he was firm and adamant that Mark Andrews was his boy going forward. He was super into him, and I would say Mark Andrews had plenty of hype coming into the season, but Laramie liked him even more, and that's paying off tenfold. That's big. Still young too, and he'll be good for a while.
Yeah, and so when you look at it, you have to imagine that his flex situation and running back situation is probably fine because he's got a lot of quality running backs. Right now on his bench, he currently has Mack and Montgomery, so that just goes to show he's got depth in the running back position. So I kind of look at his team as being 2 wide receivers away from being legitimate. Now, when you look at his picks, he's got nothing next year.
Yeah, that is a little bit tough. I mean, you either really need to hope that some of his younger, because he does have young receivers, you just have to hope that they turn out. I mean, Tyra Williams looked good. It doesn't help that they traded for Zay Jones, and I still think Tyra Williams is the number 1 on that team. But maybe he turns into a wide receiver 2. Maybe Robbie Anderson turns into a low wide receiver 1. Michael Gallup, Sterling Shepard. He does have players that have a chance. I think he's betting on them.
And the biggest one from this year's draft that we talked about last week, quote unquote, Andy Isabella. He's got him.
Yeah. Yep. True. Another dart throw.
Right. And so, yeah, he's got a lot of dart throws. A lot for him has to go right, but he is clearly a better team now than the 2 aforementioned teams that we talked about already. But he is not well positioned for a run next year, I don't think yet.
No. I mean, but he really is. If his receivers, if he can have 2 of those turn into wide receiver 2s or 3s, and then 1 is a big hit, and then his running backs stay good and Mark Andrews stays good, he's got a chance. You know, you just never know in fantasy.
So what should Laramie do now?
Man, I don't know. I know he loves those running backs, which I would too. I think we all love those running backs. They're great, high ceiling players that we just love to watch. But maybe for the health of his team, he sells one. And I know he has been shopping Mixon a bit, but I don't know. I mean, do you think you could snag? I mean, I'm not selling personally, but like a Keenan Allen type player for Joe Mixon, who can maybe be a foundation of that wide receiver. Because if you're looking at like a Keenan Allen or Cooper Kupp, and then you have Robbie Anderson and Michael Gallup behind them, compared to one of those being the number 1 receiver, that team looks quite a bit better, and you're not losing any starters at your running back position.
I completely agree, and I even think a pick could be something he'd go for, a 2021 pick specifically.
Yep.
some combination of a pick and another pick that's lower in the round, or a pick and a flyer, like these 2020 picks or 2019 rookie draft picks that didn't really pan out but could pan out in the future. That kind of thing. Some combination.
I agree. Honestly, another player he could sell to is Noah Fant. And I know I traded him to him with the Travis Kelce trade, but with just showing how Mark Andrews has turned out this year, can you see a situation where you start Fant over Andrews? Maybe if Fant pans out, you start him at the flex, but do you really want to start a tight end at the flex?
No, and Noah Fant's stock has not changed one bit since the draft, and so that to me screams at a first, maybe not a 2020 first, but that to me, that you could get a 2021 first out of him pretty easily.
Yeah, I think it's completely fine value.
Yep, for someone that needs a tight end for the future, or even potentially now, but he's a little on the weaker side for now. But anyway, Laramie's team is definitely in a much more interesting spot and more dubious spot than Magnuson's and Adams.
Just based on the draft capital, yep.
Correct. Right.
I think for this year, it's definitely a tier above.
Yes, agreed.
But then that brings us to my 9th team, and I actually think this is another tier that I would go up, and that's Marcus. And honestly, looking at his team, it really isn't that bad. You look down, you got Phillip Rivers is okay, but you got Kamara, Josh Jacobs, Robert Woods should be doing better, Tyler Lockett, Cortland Sutton's having a great season. Jack Doyle leaves something to be desired, and his flex isn't great. But those top 5 or 6 players, you really like those, right?
Yeah, I missed. Did you talk? Oh, you were talking about Carson Wentz over Rivers, right, for the future?
Oh, sure. Yep, Carson Wentz is great. Rivers is having a great season, but yep, Carson Wentz is fantastic.
I would assume that that's his pillar. And again, now we're into the tier now where this is no longer necessarily a rebuilding team, just on the lower end of the competing for now. But yeah, certainly. I've been in trade talks with Marcus too, and I'm sure he's probably pissed off at me because we've specifically been trying to trade for Fournette, and I've been stupid stingy about how I think Fournette's at least 2 firsts, and he doesn't want to give that to me. So I apologize right now. I'm sorry. I've probably been difficult to trade with. I'm not the best trade partner. But to go back to what you were saying, yeah, his team is the kind of team that kind of had a rough start, but he has a very average draft capital for next year, if not average plus. He has an additional second from what you'd normally have for 2020.
Yeah. So I think his if you didn't have any trades in the league, he has a very, very standard team top to bottom. He has a running back 1, he has a running back 2, maybe not a wide receiver 1, but a couple of wide receiver 2s, and then average draft capital. If we're talking about potential moves, I honestly don't know. Unless I'm missing a tight end, is his starting tight end either Delaney Walker or Jack Doyle, or does he have a better one?
Nope, that's it.
Because that could be potential to trade for. But other than that, I honestly wouldn't fault him if he just wants to hold and try to make it based on draft capital.
Absolutely. Yep. So yeah, you can't kind of answer the question that was on the tip of my tongue, which was, what does he do now? And yeah, hold. Yeah. I don't even think he has to try to go for a tight end. He could draft one.
I think that'd be fine too. If he really, just based on the way his division's kind of panning out with those 2 top teams being a little bit older with pretty low draft capital, if he wants to decide to go to rebuild, he could sell Alvin Kamara because the rest of his team is so young. And given Alvin Kamara is pretty young too, but he's probably almost halfway through his career. And it could be a lot different landscape if you can scoop 3 firsts for him, if that makes sense. But like I said, that's only if you want to make moves. I think it'd be completely fine to hold.
Yep. I think that in general, trading is just intrinsically risky, especially if you don't know what your team is going to look like. And picks follow you in value, right? So if you're bad, you want picks, and if you're good, you don't necessarily want them. But I guess to me, if you don't know what your team is going to do, that's when you hold your picks.
Yeah, I'd say at least hold picks. If not, I think trading for picks is always fine, just because it's the most liquid asset you can get in fantasy. You can literally trade picks for everything, compared to some people don't need a running back and some people don't need a receiver, or they don't value Leonard Fournette the same way you do, if that makes sense. So that's the one benefit of picks, I'd say too.
And now as you're saying that, I think I wish we would have clarified this earlier, but 2 things. Number 1, this power ranking is based on strictly this year.
Yes.
Number 2, and this is your definition in your words, which I really like, but I'm going to steal for saying this. This power ranking is based off of playoff opportunity / championship winning ability. And so I think that kind of clarifies what do power rankings mean. It's not necessarily about recency at all.
It's not what your team was last week. It's not what your team will do this week. It's what we expect the end of the season to be.
Based on what your record is, what your point total is.
And what your team looks like.
Which I think is fantastic for fantasy power rankings. And I guess now I already know who is next. So give me the lowdown.
It's actually you, believe it or not. And honestly, if you want the analysis of your team, running back elite, QB elite, running back 1 solid. I mean, Zeke hasn't had the phenomenal season, but he's still been good. Leonard Fournette's been a lot better than some people expected. Got Tyreek back, which is great. Juju's down, but you have other receivers to fill him in. So yeah, overall, I personally ranked you this low, which is honestly pretty close to the middle of the pack, just based on your start to the season. It's almost impossible now for you to make playoffs based on record, but your points are still, I mean, they're lower than average, but they're close enough that you could make playoffs strictly based on points.
Right. And it's interesting that we just talked about Skonieski's team, because in the same way that we think he could hold, I hope I'm not delusional and think that I also can hold. And I personally would love to go for a run this year. I agree that it's very narrow, or that it's very low chances, but there's no, looking top down, there really isn't an obvious sell at my team. Unless you can think of an obvious sell due to age or due to situation, I can't.
No, I mean, there's nothing due to age, and obviously you don't have any monstrous holes, so there's no obvious buy either. And I just, as a kind of a general comment for our league, I already do really like the change we implemented this year for allowing teams to enter the playoffs strictly based on points. Because looking at our league halfway through this season, in my opinion, there are still 9 teams that are relatively clearly in the run still. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe Laramie could sneak in there too. I mean, he's only about 19 points behind you. So, he has a couple of huge weeks too. So, I mean, it really makes it anyone's game. I think holding would be completely fine. And you just got to hope your team plays better than it did the first half.
Yep. And that's my plan for now.
All right. With that, we have a guy that's had a lot of ups and downs with Ben Fowler. 3-3, pretty middle of the road points. So I think 7th overall kind of makes sense for him. Saquon Barkley getting injured was pretty brutal for him because he does not have a deep team, but he came back way earlier than everyone expected. So him coming back this week probably should have a huge boost, especially against Arizona. Dak Prescott's good. Aaron Jones, if he stops fumbling, will be good. Saquon Barkley, Thielen, Fitzgerald, Chark. Honestly, pretty good team top to bottom, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one major player, since I'm coming from a frame of reference of who is an obvious sell, is Larry Fitzgerald. But as a ranked 7th in your power rankings, I think that he should be trying to make the playoffs at this point. And Larry Fitzgerald is not someone that you want to sell. I think he actually is a perfect example of someone that if there's 2 weeks left and you're now eliminated from playoff contention, then you sell him. And I actually think you could flip him for like a third, and someone might want him for the playoffs very reasonably.
I completely agree, especially with the ways Kyler's playing. So, his team is honestly looking not too bad. You just got to hope it picks it up a little bit to make it over that cusp, because he's 2 games behind both Jake and Mike, which is pretty brutal. So, but I mean, you never know that with those 3 other divisional games coming at the back of the season, if he sweeps, he's got a decent chance to kind of come from behind in that division.
Absolutely. And just looking at his team as a once again, his big hole is tight end. I mean, you've talked about how Ricky Seals-Jones has been good, but on the other side, it's between Seals-Jones and Dawson Knox, which, in my opinion, if he wants to be a serious playoff contender, he would have to improve that position.
Yeah.
And I don't think either of those guys are really high upside where they could all of a sudden come out of nowhere, except for maybe Dawson Knox theoretically. But
yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, traditionally, tight end hasn't been the most coveted position, but if you look at some of these teams above him, they have all of the same or equal level positional players, but with a great tight end to add. So it's going to be tough to compete.
Yeah, so looking at draft capital, pretty mediocre draft capital. It's got a couple 3rds and 4ths this year, average for 2021, but what do you think he should do with his team?
Honestly, I think it's a pretty clear hold now. I think with the moves he's made recently, that kind of thrust him into that position. He's made similar moves that Mike Reed, actually, who we'll be talking about a little bit later, made before this season to pick up some young players that are also win now. So he's kind of building based on players rather than on picks, which if it works out, that's great. If it doesn't, that's going to be a tough couple of years.
Yep, that's very true. Yeah, who's your next guy in the rankings?
All right, at number 6, we have Barber. He is 4-2, also kind of middle of the road at 946 points. I think he might be a Patriots fan, just based on the teams. Tom Brady, Sony Michel, Patriots defense. Yeah, he's really, really benefiting from their really hot start.
Yeah, and you talk about Patriots defense. To me, that jumps out is I don't care if I'm competing, not competing. I think I'm selling him. If I can get a second out of him or a third from him, I'm doing it just because it's defense, and I don't personally buy into defense as much as far as how volatile it can be. You also have to keep in mind the funny question that most of the media has been posing is, do we actually know if the Patriots defense is good, or is it just the competition?
Probably a little bit of both, honestly. So like they're obviously good, but they're not this. No one's this good.
No, and to look at the rest of his team too. We every week we talk about Tyler Boyd and DJ Moore as guys that are like, hey, they should be good, and they have been, but that's about it, right? Like we thought Tyler Boyd was taking the next step. Mm-hmm. He's had a couple cold weeks the last 2 weeks, and it'll be again interesting to monitor for AJ Green moving forward. But I guess really we're looking at a team pretty similar to Fowler's, I think, and even mine to some extent, where there aren't really any major holes, but they're all kind of all players that are below the elite tier.
Okay, I do want to point out one thing is that he does have Devontae Adams, who's injured currently.
True.
Who he is in the elite tier based on my personal rankings.
Well, but yes. Down year for him, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep, a little bit of a down year. So it'll be really nice to get a boost to him because I think his receivers are really good when Adams is back, with Adams, Boyd, and Moore. Running backs, I don't know, man. Royce Freeman, do you think he's good enough to start in at a running back 2 position?
No, especially because Philip Lindsay was rocky to start the year, but they've been committing to him, and the Broncos actually look reasonable all of a sudden because their defense can carry him. Mm-hmm. It's so similar to the Tim Tebow year where their defense just carried them into the playoffs, and they won 1 game with Tim Tebow because their defense. Anyway, that's divergent, but Royce Freeman isn't an RB2 really, or is he a low end RB2?
Maybe
so
at the highest, I would say.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the strength of this team is pretty clearly in the receivers. I mean, his 5th receiver, honestly, is Marvin Jones, which is pretty dang impressive, but the running backs are a little bit lackluster. When Evan Ingram comes back, that'll be a really big boost. What do you think for recommendations for this team?
That's a great question. Recommendations is, again, it's weird looking at his because he has literally made 0 draft capital changes.
Yep.
And I would suspect that he could trade draft capital and become a pretty legitimate team.
Trade for a running back, and that would, to me, that would secure his playoff opportunity. Now the question is it worth it for him to do so? Whenever you're asking that question, you have to say, all right, is my team a team that needs to win now, or could it win in the future? And pretty immediately you look at it, and the only truly old player he's got is his quarterback, which we all know is pretty easy. It's the easiest position to acquire on the fly. And so, yeah, he's got a very young team, mostly top to bottom, other than that one hole in running back in Royce Freeman with Tyler Boyd, DJ Moore, and I'm forgetting his last word. Oh, Devontae Adams, all young. And Evan Ingram.
Young tight end. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is another instance of being just a hold.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be fine. But as you mentioned before, if you wanted a package, maybe Sony Michel and a first, and get one of a guy that's the next tier up, that could probably be a top 10 running back, that would be fine if you wanted to go that way as well. I personally would probably hold just based on the age of his team, like you mentioned.
Right. He can totally just stick around, have his typical draft class of next year, or draft capital, and just use that next year and be a playoff contender years in a row.
Yep. Just go first and second round, just draft a running back if you can.
Right. And with what I view our playoffs now as, if you can make it to the playoffs as a 3 through 6 seed, you have just as much chance as anyone from 3 through 6.
Yeah. I mean, basically.
Right. It's the seeds that you're going for. I don't think he can do anything. Or sorry, it's the buys that you're going for in the meaningful difference. And I don't think he can do anything to become a buy team all of a sudden in either this year or next year.
I agree. Aside from just a lucky couple of wins, basically, but nothing to actually boost his statistical chances.
Yes.
Okay. Well, with that, we go on to number 5, which is Trujillo. And in my opinion, this is kind of another tier break. I think the top 5 are. I would bet on all 5 of these teams making the playoffs at this point. I don't know about that 6th position, and maybe one falls out, but I think these top 5 are most likely going to make it. He's had a pretty brutal stretch of QB. It looks like he'll have Josh Allen back, which is great. But Chris Carson, Devonta Freeman, hopefully Melvin Gordon can pick it up because that'd be huge. But then, I mean, Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, T.Y. Hilton, and then I know he has a couple good ones on his bench, MVS and Ridley, just to name a couple. And then he traded for Austin Hooper to fill one of his only two holes. I mean, I think he has a great team. I think he has a legitimate chance to be the highest scorer going forward for the rest of the year. I basically rank him at 5 personally. 4-2, which is not a bad record. 986, which is not bad points. I think it's 3rd or 4th. But he's 2 games behind Cody, who's 6-0. So it's going to be really tough for him to win that division.
Yeah, he had some slight concerns at the beginning of the year, as we all know, because he went from being a lot of people's number 1 team in our league to the whole Antonio Brown fallout involving that. Wait, this is his team, right?
Andrew Luck.
I'm sorry, Andrew Luck. I couldn't remember which one it was. Yeah, Andrew Luck, right? And so now his quarterback situation was all of a sudden in flux. And so we were saying, is this enough to bring his team down? Which we all thought it was. And then Josh Allen all of a sudden emerged and looks like a legit quarterback for Buffalo. So, yeah, I love his team. I'm with you. I think he's 5th, but it's like 5th with an arrow pointing up.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think if we're going to talk about where he wants to go, I think it's pretty dang clear. You take a look at his draft capital.
I know, it's non-existent.
He has 0 in the next 2 years, which, I mean, honestly, with that team he's built is fine. Even looking at this team, he's still gotten unlucky with it, just based on the players that have gotten injured or just been bad or anything like that. So I think he's honestly built a solid team. Might be old. I would say he'll honestly probably be rebuilding 2 to 3 years from now, and almost starting from scratch. But in the next 2 years, I think he'll be a legit championship contender.
Yep. Especially if we're focusing on this year, he's a team that I think will or does have a very high chance at making the championship. I just don't buy that his team is good enough to win in the championship.
That's fair. Yep. But anything can happen, even in 2-week playoffs. So
absolutely,
getting there's big. With that, we'll go to number 4, which is Jake O'Brien. 5-1, so obviously great record. I have him a little bit lower than, I guess, just a couple other teams, just based on his points. 968 is not bad. It's just not quite in that top tier. If you look at, I mean, a guy in his own division, quick math is hard, but I believe that's about 150 points ahead of Jake, that's not nothing. His team has really come ahead in the last couple of weeks, which is awesome. Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. Lev Bell's been good. I see his James White in right now. I know he also has Todd Gurley and James Conner, who just had a big week. His receivers are starting to play better, especially Terry McLaurin, who we've talked about. Hopefully Zach Ertz can pick it up, but he also has Darren Waller. I mean, not really a hole in this team either.
No holes and very clear depth. And a lot of that comes from, to me, Le'Veon Bell really answering the doubters, the fantasy doubters, and Terry McLaurin coming out of nowhere to be a starter for him. I mean, he's at least a wide receiver too. And so, yeah, again, he's having the opposite situation as last year. He's really not a high point scorer so far through half one, but his record is 5-1. And so he's pretty, and this is why I think you ranked him as number 4, because he's got a very high chance of making the playoffs.
The last couple of weeks he has been up there too, which is, I think he's 5th or 6th in points right now. So it's better than it was to start the season. But
right. And now if I had to pick a clear separator between his team and the one just aforementioned in Trujillo, is that I actually do think Obi is an example of a team that could win the championship if he made there.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think his top end talent is enough. It's especially with his receivers. If he can get a couple of big games like Terry McLaurin and Will Fuller have showed they can do, that could be a complete difference maker for him.
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel like we've already kind of covered it, but if we're talking about what he should do, I think it's a pretty clear hold. He doesn't have significant draft capital. He doesn't have significant holes in his lineup. Ride it out while you're hot.
Yep, 100%.
All right. With that, we'll go to, in my opinion, the last tier of our rankings, and that is the top 3, with myself at number 3. I rank myself at number 3 just because 4-2, which is a pretty decent record. I'm technically leading my division, second highest points in the league, and I think I've made a couple of pretty good trades recently to booster my starting lineup. So what do you think about it, Tom?
Yeah, I think that you're being slightly humble, because I think you're at least 2, or not at least 2. I think you could make a strong argument for you being 2. I think you and Mike's power rankings, in the sense that he's 5-1, that helps his power ranking for, I am assuming you're going to put him at number 2. But your team is absolutely insane now after the trades you made, and you still have future draft capital. Yeah. I mean, obviously you followed the strategy, and we actually haven't talked much about this on the show, any of what your trades have done, but you basically went with, I'm going to make a very high volume amount of trades that I believe I'm winning. And then the last couple trades from there will be filling out my roster. And you did that. You don't have a single hole. Your worst player on your team is Derrick Henry, that you start regularly, but he is a top 15 running back in my eyes this year, at least, if not better. And so I think that you are now, I agree with what this tier evaluation is, because you actually probably have the highest chance of winning the championship, even over Cody and Mike. And so, do I agree with your analysis on why you're 3? Yes, because you're 4-2, probably don't have the greatest chance of being a bye week, but you have the strongest chance of winning the championship for sure.
I mean, I agree with all that. I could always get bounced in one of the first 2 rounds too. Obviously, if I steal a bye week, I would probably put myself at number 1. I mean, there's still a lot of season left, so we can see where it goes. But yeah, I mean, I think the top 3 scorers are all up by 70 or 80 points in the field too, so I think that's kind of a clear difference there. But yeah, other than that, I don't think any huge difference makers on my team right now. It's just pretty consistent all the way through.
Absolutely.
With that, you were correct. My number 2 is Mike Reed, our league highest point scorer on the year. What is his power ranking now? It is number 2. So he keeps on rising, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if Cody drops a game and he wins one, and he has more points than Cody, I think that instantly vaults him to number 1. I have him number 2 because he is 5-1, obviously, with highest points. Jake is also 5-1. So Jake wins a game and Mike loses a game. He's not even the division leader, much less the league leader. But I expect him to win the division. I expect him to get the bye. He's got a great team. Russell Wilson, we've talked about, the number 1 player so far this year. His running backs are Chubb and Kerryon Johnson, solid and young. When he has all of his starters in, he has Cooper Kupp, Kenny Golladay, and Godwin, who's been a huge boost to his team. Will Dissly does hurt a lot, so that's kind of another reason to have him at 2. But as long as he can trade for another tight end, I think his team's really good.
Yeah, I loved everything you said there. He also, like your team, doesn't really have a hole, but he now does in Will Dissly. So he actually might be someone that's looking to trade. And so I'm going to jump right into the question of what should he do moving forward. And the sad thing is he doesn't really have much draft capital unless someone's wanted to dip into the 2022 year already. He's got to figure out the tight end situation, in my opinion, to be a championship runner, because otherwise it's going to be you and Cody and Jake that are going to be serious championship contenders. Do you disagree?
No, I think he has to trade for someone, and honestly, I don't think it should be that hard, given he doesn't have necessarily the draft capital. But I don't know if you can start. What's his name? Sorry, the Pittsburgh guy.
Benny Snell?
No, Vance McDonald.
Oh, Vance McDonald.
I don't know if you can start Vance McDonald and really be a competitive team, but there should be some young tight ends out there that he can scoop up. I mean, maybe a Greg Olsen or a Jason Witten or even a Kyle Rudolph could potentially be a spot filler for him. So pretty unlucky from his point of view, though. Yeah,
and I think it's pretty realistic that. Well, the problem is, I guess if he tries to trade Philip Lindsay, then he instantly has a problem at flex, so he can't really do that. I don't think he can really trade. I guess McCoy, if he tries to eke value out him for a tight end, that could be reasonable.
Well, I mean, even A couple of those I listed, you don't need that much, right? I mean,
True.
if you had Rudolph, would you give him for a third? Because I would.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think he'll be a fine starter. I mean, even like a Jimmy Graham, maybe.
Yes.
You could.
Greg Olson from Matt,
like,
just if he still has him.
I think he does. Like, these players probably are barely even starters on most people's teams. Would be a pretty big boost on his team.
It's boost over Vance McDonald, which for a while there we thought was going to be, nods up because of Mason Rudolph, but that did not turn out.
No, it didn't. But I think his team will still be fine. He can plug that hole. I think the rest of his starting lineup is good enough to take over that. Just if Godwin and Kupp can keep it up, that's huge.
Absolutely. So that leaves one more team.
It sure does. That is our reigning champion, Cody Hala. He has been a good mix of luck and his team just being good. I mean, third highest point, so I'm not going to say he's deserving of a 6-0 record, but there it is anyway. 6-0, 2-game lead on his entire division, third highest points. It's obviously not a lock at this point for him winning the division and getting a bye, but he's clearly the front runner to get a bye. His team's solid. I mean, Golden Tate getting him back is huge. His players have, other than I guess OBJ hasn't been that good, have been performing well enough. So, and Daniel Jones is honestly huge for him with Brees being out.
He is, but I think this is actually one of the first instances where we just talked about earlier. We talked about holes and what are these holes that people need to fill to win. I don't think Cody has any holes, but he has clear opportunities for improvement in quarterback and RB2. If he's really truly the number one team, you and Mike don't have really a position that are as low as both Daniel Jones and Mark Ingram when you look at it. And so I know I've been in trade talks potentially with someone for Cody, and I know that Daniel Jones is good enough, but he's the worst quarterback in the championship conversation. So
yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. He doesn't technically have any holes, but, and this is pretty much the same dang team he had when he won the championship last year, and we all agreed it was based on his top talent. I mean, Mike Evans, OBJ, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle, which they're all still great. But this year, when teams have made other trades, like I've gotten Michael Thomas and David Johnson, and Mike got Godwin, and Cooper Kupp's been a lot better. We don't have the holes, or not holes, but slight weaknesses that he does, where he's starting John Brown or a Josh Gordon, or, I mean, Golden Tate's better than those two, but still not necessarily fantastic. And will Mark Ingram keep it up? His last 3 weeks, he's averaged about 12, which I can't say that about the running backs in the other top teams. So I agree with you. I don't necessarily think he's a hold. I think he should be going out and getting someone probably.
Yes. And I guess let's invent a new term, because we talk about holes a lot in teams, and it's kind of interesting with all the trades going on. The holes aren't necessarily always there. Now, I think Cody's team is an example of the new term soft spot. He's got a few soft spots, and that could be what ruins his title opportunity.
I agree with that completely. And I know even from his point of view, he's been fine with having those soft spots. He's said multiple times, if I can get 10 to 12 points from Josh Gordon a week, I'm completely fine with that. And although that's fair and you can beat most of the teams, are you going to be okay with that in a 2-week playoff if Christian McCaffrey doesn't get 100 points in 2 weeks? Because given he might, but I don't think you can rely on that.
100% agree. Yeah, and I guess that's it. That's it, right? That's
well, we have our last discussion topic, but yeah, that's the end of the power rankings, I think.
That's it for the power rankings. And so now what we're going to try to do every week for you viewers, and to kind of, again, the part of the podcast's goal is to encourage discussion and we love just talking about football, so it's kind of fun to organizingly talk about it in an organized way. But now we want to turn to the listeners, and this week's discussion topic, which we're going to do moving forward, I think from the sound of it, we want it to be mainly rule-oriented discussions or logistic changes. And this week's discussion that we want to talk about is Superflex. We've talked about it a lot. It's probably the number one topic of a change that a lot of us want to do, but we actually haven't really talked about it in writing. We've just talked about it verbally. And so the question is, should we be interested as a league in moving towards Superflex? And so, Sam, I want to turn it to you. What's your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be really fun. I do think if we made this change, because it's such a substantial change, it should be elected that we make it probably, honestly, 2 years out, or at least 2 rookie drafts out. Like we could do it before the next rookie draft and then have it implemented in 2021. But either way, I think it'd be really interesting. It would add a ton of value to quarterbacks, which is just innately fun. I mean, we've talked about it's not that hard to fill a quarterback position. I mean, it sucks for Trujillo, but he's had 3 quarterbacks, I believe, get injured this year, and he still has a decent quarterback to play. And then you can't really say that about any other position. If I had 3 running backs get injured, my team would be done. So I just think it'd be fun to actually add value to the position and have that equivalent to other positions going forward.
Yeah, and I think previously in previous years there have been concerns over the tight end position also being kind of like, oh well, is there value to it? But this year has really magnified the value in tight end. I mean, how many times do we talk about today this team needs a tight end? And so whereas we only talk about really one team or 1 or 2 teams needing a quarterback. And so yes, super flex for sure makes it so that is now a team need, which just makes the league more interesting. It makes more trades possible. It makes even watching it more interesting because quarterbacks are the most important part of the game. And so in combination with what you said, I completely agree with Superflex being viable. And I'd be very disheartened if it actually didn't get past this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, the only argument I could see against it really is that we didn't draft that way. But I'm kind of hoping that having 2 years to be able to build trades or drafts around that will actually impact and kind of counter our original draft a lot more than that. I think at least that basically everyone I've talked to that's done Superflex has said it's significantly better than not doing Superflex. And I would think at least, actually, I believe now probably at least 2/3 of our league has done it based on, I know Matt and Trujillo and Mike are in another league that just switched to Superflex this year. So I'd be really interested to hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a perfect time to turn to you guys to hear what you guys think. And we will post, in addition to the podcast, we'll post that question of the week and maybe make a poll. This will most likely go on Facebook and maybe Sleeper too. So yeah, that's the show, Sam. I think that was pretty sweet. We missed Cody for sure. Hopefully he's listening and gives us plenty of critique.
Yep.
I'm sure he will.
Wait, I put him number 1, didn't I? Crap.
Oh no. Now he's going to know that his team is good. Shit.
No.
Well, with that, Sam, anything left to say?
No, that's about it. Let's do some analysis on kickers, defense, and IDPs.
Yeah, they're all players.
Oh, okay, good.
Sweet. Perfect way to end it. Thanks again, you guys, for listening. We will look forward to your response to our question. Peace.